because at any given point, I probably have about 25 to 35% of my families in the midst of intimate partner violence.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not usually what they say. It's not on the questionnaire, it's not what's said. So I have learned just over time that I have to assess for safety. And that means that uh, the locks, what are the locks situation on the house? What about do you have a ring camera? What about how have you all communicated who will come to the house and when? Do you have all of your finances in place, all of the credit cards? What's your money situation? So that's one of the basic things that we have to cover because I've had multiple situations where the police have been called to the home, and then I get a frantic call, whether it's 2 p.m. on a Saturday, 2 a.m. on a Sunday, that something has happened. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I always try to allow people to get the story out because it
Mm-hmm.
is impossible for me to sort of tell and instruct before the clients and patients feel that I have heard and understand.
Yes.
And once
Welcome to Legally Uncensored, where we have the real conversations about love, law, and liberation. I'm your host, Demetria Graves, and this season we're reframing relationships through a new lens. Today we have Dr. Sherri Simpson Broadwater, aka Dr. Sherri, who is a double board certified adult, child, and adolescent psychiatrist and the co founder of Healing for All, a psychiatric and coaching center in Atlanta that she leads with her husband, Robert Lee Broadwater Jr. She empowers individuals and families to find their voice, balance, and joy through the innovative approaches, including walking wellness sessions, virtual care, and parent child workshops. A proud Howard University and Meharry Medical College alumna, Dr. Sherri specializes in helping high performing women, teens, and families transform stress and disconnection into clarity, confidence, and fulfillment. Drawing from her own experiences with burnout, delayed parenting, and the strong Black woman syndrome, she blends psychiatry, coaching, and faith to promote healing, safety, and success. Please welcome Dr. Sherri to Legally Uncensored. And Dr. Sherri, thank you so much for being here.
thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. So excited.
Awesome. So tell us, I think we covered a lot, but tell us about yourself.
Hi, Attorney Graves.
Thank
It
you.
is
Thank you.
such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. And a little bit more about me. So, I am the youngest of two daughters and also the product of divorce. And my parents were married about 6 or 7 years. And one of the only memories of that I have of my parents was when my dad was leaving my mom.
Mm,
So it was the day he was transitioning out of the house. I remember my sister and I crying in the chair that's still there in the house, and that has definitely impacted my life journey and
mm,
and what I contribute to working with patients and clients.
mm.
And so we have a coaching and psychiatric practice here in the Atlanta area. Now it's in College Park, and it's been a blessing and a burden and a journey and a blessing. I'm gonna circle it around, but we're excited to be doing that, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you. You said something that resonated with me. You said you watched your father transition out of the resident.
Yes,
And a lot
yes.
of times I don't think a lot of people understand what that means to children, right? Cuz some children are reserved, some cry, some don't really understand. But that is a really big point, and I really want my clients to understand that this is a process for everybody involved, not just the adults that are going through the transition. Which brings me to our first point is oftentimes, and I'm sure you feel this way, I feel I'm always walking on the battlefield, right? The relationship has ended. Now we're getting into this, okay, we have to reorganize our family. We have to go through this business of divorce, and the parties have locked horns, and here we are, right? So you're on the battlefield, I'm on the battlefield. So when someone comes to you in that emotional state, what do you tell them when they've locked horns, they're ready to go to war? How do you kind of diffuse that situation?
Well, it just depends on the scenario. So I'm going to start with what's most pressing. So my couples, it's usually one. So what is usually, and
Right.
it's usually the woman who comes in. The first thing is to assess for safety because at any given point, I probably have about 25 to 35% of my families in the midst of intimate partner violence. And that is not usually what they say. It's not on the questionnaire, it's not what's said. So I have learned over time that I have to assess for safety. And that means that uh, the locks, what are the locks situation on the house? What about do you have a ring camera? What about how have you all communicated who will come to the house and when? Do you have all of your finances in place, all of the credit cards? What's your money situation? So that's one of the basic things that we have to cover because I've had multiple situations where the police have been called to the home, and then I get a frantic call, whether it's 2 p.m. on a Saturday, 2 a.m. on a Sunday, that something has happened. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I always try to allow people to get the story out because it is impossible for me to sort of tell and instruct before the clients and patients feel that I have heard and understand.
Yes.
And once I can build the rapport, then it is what are the basic functionings of your life, of your household. And that really is, I sort of go around, but I go around the 8 pillars of health. So how are we doing emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, sexually, occupationally, which is a big one, and also financially. So those last two are some of the biggest issues that we have to discuss because oftentimes there is a change in residence, there's a change in often career, there's the bank account is gone. There's no savings. So what are those basics that really keep them from even because if we don't know where food is going to come from, if we don't know how to pay bills, it's very hard to get people to journal 3 times a day or do
Right.
deep breathing,
Right.
basic fundamentals that we work on first.
You bring up an interesting point because I have clients where they'll come to the office and they'll say, well, I left the house because my ex's behavior is escalating. And I don't think a lot of people know that that is a precursor for abuse. So, what are we doing? I can do a divorce filing all day long, but what are we doing to make sure you are safe? And I think we have to redefine what abuse looks like. It's not always a slap. It's not always a punch in the face. Sometimes it's the escalating behavior. It's the multiple phone calls, the multiple texts, the appearing when you've asked that person not to appear. All of that is a precursor for what's to come. And I think we have to stabilize that, to your point, before we can really get into the details of what needs to happen. And that's all before we even talk about the conflict between the parties as they enter into a divorce. So once we kind of try to destabilize what we're talking about, what do you do as a woman or anybody that you want to navigate the process in peace, but they do not? So what do I do if I've accepted, okay, this is what it is. I've made all of the arrangements for my life to go through this process, but this person wants to fight. What do I do?
When I saw that question, I just it's overwhelming, and it's a hard response, because if you have selected someone who is this um, immature, primitive, toxic, dangerous, it typically means the fantasy, the idealized life that you wanted for yourself and for your children is not going to occur.
Right.
So that means that there has to be radical acceptance of what this new life will be. And that may mean that if it keeps the peace, it may mean that he gets the house.
Mm.
It may mean that you want primary custody. It may mean that you will have to accept it. It may be joint custody. It may mean that he has the children,
Mm.
and it may mean you have to move. So it's very difficult, because we have selected, and that goes back to some of the other topics we're going to talk about, that we have selected poorly. And this is absolutely not a judgment, but the selection is the selection.
Mm.
And the ramifications, the sequela, the complications because of the selection will go on for 5 to 10 to 15, 20 years. But what we can do most of all is to make sure we are the most mentally healthy person for ourselves and for our children and for our families that we can be. Because at some point, our children, if we have children, are going to need a mentally healthy parent.
That is beautiful. And you said something that I think a lot of us don't want to accept is the selection, right? Your bad or good or whatever selection will follow you the rest of your life into this process and beyond. And so I think a lot of us skip that in the pre-marriage stage, and we can have a completely different show on this topic. But that is important. And then radical acceptance. So I guess my question is, even if I've accepted that the relationship is over, even if I did the work, I came to sit with Dr. Sherri and I know my game plan, how do I deal emotionally with the other party who has not? Who has not accepted that the relationship is over, has not accepted that I am moving forward with this process. So how do I navigate the divorce process or co-parenting together if they're not doing what they need to do?
Yeah. Well, it's very complicated, and each case is individual. So it is firm boundaries. It is people to intervene and mediate. For example, I have a number of families where no one else in the family knows what's going on in the marriage. So there's no aunt, there's no uncle, there's no grandparent there to help intervene, and that's a part of the cycle of abuse and neglect and trauma, the secret keeping and the lies. And I think the more we can undo that, the more support we can get.
Mm-hmm.
That may mean that we tap into our support to be the drop off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a basic thing that we can do. It's not basic, but it is something that we can do, because none of this is easy. Um, it may mean that for a while, and I actually just had a conversation with a person a few days ago, that though we may desire connection and romance and sex and intimacy and all of that, we may have to put that off for 6 months, 8 months, a year. In order to help even the energy to sort of die down,
Yes.
which is unfortunate, because especially leading up to the divorce is a lot of isolation and loneliness, and we seek that, we need that because it's natural. But in order to just keep things at bay, we may need to delay that as well. So those are two things that we can do, and also utilize our court system, and also our attorneys, like you, attorney Demetria. The number of women that I have had in my practice who do not have an attorney,
Mm-hmm.
think that they're going to mediate this, especially it was a terrible marriage. complicated marriage. And to think that you're going to try to go into the next steps without an attorney. So that's another thing that I would suggest.
Mhm.
Make sure that you're also not doing this legally by yourself.
Right. So what I hear you saying ultimately is there's a lot of acceptance there, and there's a lot of I can only do what I can do. So I'm going to do my part to navigate this. What the other party does is kind of their business, as long as I'm doing what I need to do, in a sense.
An added part to this is being mindful to not inflame or antagonize.
Mm-hmm.
That is the part of this, which may mean that if we know this person has not accepted what I'm doing in the marriage and the divorce and the next steps, if we know that bringing in an outside partner will antagonize or inflame the situation, then it's my suggestion, it's my recommendation that we try to hold off of that until the temperature is less.
Right. I agree with you. And one thing I always try to bring to the forefront when I'm going through talking to someone for the first time or we're starting the process is to bring the situation back to the children. So, just for context, can you tell me one thing, or unless you have two or three, but one thing that kids of high conflict divorces always say in therapy 10, 20, 15 years after their experience?
Well, this is a major issue that I see is that parents will obtain support at times for their children, but often do not seek out family therapy.
Mm,
So what it looks like for the children is, though you keep saying this is not about me, why am I the only one going to this outside person, this stranger, to work on me? So one thing that I do encourage is that children are getting their support and their guidance and counseling. The parents are doing their work individually, but there has to be some type of family work to to work through what has happened, what is going on now, and to also help with creating the framework and parameters of which we're going to use to move through.
right.
So that is I think my main recommendation is just one thing is that parents commit to doing family work, which most parents don't do.
You're right. That's interesting because a lot of times we hear, okay, we're going to send the child to therapy for 4 or 5 sessions. Mom, you need to go to therapy, or dad, you need to go to therapy. But I rarely hear everyone needs to go together. But that's important because that's a great space to kind of redefine the family, redefine the unit, redefine what's going to happen. And that's, to me, more realistic to a child. Oh, okay, I have a say in this. This is changing, but I'm a part of this. That makes way more sense than what we are currently doing across the board. And to that end, because a lot of times they'll say, hey, mom, you go to therapy for 5 sessions. But sometimes that might not be enough. So, in your experience, because I get asked this question and I really don't know, how long does it take someone to navigate the pain of a divorce and in this experience?
Well, I think it is individual specific and it's family specific. It depends on how healthy the relationship and the people were before the divorce. I think that that definitely is a will determine that. For for most people, it's at minimum 1 to 2 years.
Mm.
So 1 to 2 years of healing, evolving, reflecting, and hopefully really working on themselves, how they got here, how where they are now, and what they want. And so my suggestion is usually at least 6 to 12 months working with someone
Mm.
consistently. And consistently is once a week or every other week. I do not suggest monthly because what happens is if it's too much space between appointments, usually the person spends a lot of time catching the therapist up versus really working on understanding and skill building.
And to that end, I always say I don't know if it's healthy or wise to date anyone in that 6 to 12 month period. But what I have learned, some people start their healing journey at the end of a relationship. So they might be 3, 4 months in before the divorce starts. So I think it's very important to get clarity on that before you start dating someone to see where they are in their healing journey. But that's a different podcast for a different time. But people always want to know when they can start dating, when is it healthy to date. But to your point, that 6 to 12 months, whenever you begin that journey, is a very important journey. And so, to that end, why do people feel sometimes leaving, although that's probably best, that hurts more than just staying?
Well, again, for so many people, there's so much, shame, humiliation, embarrassment, sadness, despair attached to leaving. And for most of us, we marry someone and we become I don't want to say affixed, but we identify and enjoy the person that we become because of. And it's very tough to to leave that person. So it's really that person within us that we will have to give up because now we no longer have that person. And then tie in any attachment issues. So I'm anxiously attached so that I feel overwhelmed not being connected. If I'm ambivalent, I want, but then I don't want. All of that then flares up
Mm-hmm.
and can make it very difficult then to separate out. And then also, if we don't have problem solving, we don't have coping skills, we don't have community, then starting over means that I'm really this sort of this isolated, um, disenfranchised being that's all alone. And for many people, I mean, for most people, that's a place that appears impossible. That's an impossible stance to want to seek out and to walk in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the reason why. And then also, if our system is accustomed to pain and toxicity and hurt, then that's another reason why it makes it very difficult for me to now walk into healing and to create healing, and even to think that that even is possible.
Wow. Well, as you see, we have so much to unpack. And I so enjoyed talking to you, but I think we have to have an episode 2 because there is so much to talk about. And so, if you enjoyed this episode, we hope you join Dr. Sherri and I for part 2. So, Dr. Sherri, thank you so much for joining Legally Uncensored. And quickly tell us and the people how they can find you.
I can be followed on Facebook and Instagram at Dr. Sherri Psych. That's DrSherriPsych. Dr. Sherri Psych on Instagram and on Facebook.
Well, thank you so much. And I am looking forward to part 2.
Me too.
Peace isn't found in the paperwork, it's built in how you show up every single day. Divorce and co parenting after chaos takes self awareness, patience, and boundaries. The law can outline the plan, but only your healing makes it work. This is Legally Uncensored, and remember, your power comes when you choose peace over performance. Thank you again to Dr. Sherri for an important conversation that can be overlooked by custody battles, divorce, and control. Don't forget to stay connected to Legally Uncensored on all social platforms and visit us on YouTube and our website at Legally Uncensored Podcast for new episodes and updates.